Like many other consoles in the 2000s, the PlayStation 2 had a lot of shovelware on it. Shovelware has always existed. We all remember ET on the Atari 2600, but man, did it feel like a booming industry during this period. Every other game was a cash grab or a ripoff of some other game. Personally, I owned Cats vs. Dogs 2: The Revenge of Kitty Galore on the DSi. Super innovative stuff, I know. For the most part, though, my mom avoided these kinds of games. When I recall the PlayStation 2 games we had, I think of Kingdom Hearts, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, some other games I wasn't old enough to play, and that was where one game came in. Kingdom Hearts was fun and all, but I didn't have many other options as a 7-year-old. I had my Wii, yeah, but if I couldn't invade my brother's console, I wouldn't be a very good little brother, now would I? This was where THRILLVILLE Off the Rails came into play. THRILLVILLE Off the Rails is a 2007 tycoon strategy game where you manage multiple theme parks with the goal of completing missions and satisfying guests. The game was developed by Frontier Developments, who has made some fantastic games and also Dog's Life. LucasArts was also the publisher of this game, and before it stopped making games, put out some great ones like LEGO Star Wars, Sam & Max, a lot of Star Wars games. They were kind of a hit or miss company. I remember having a lot of time with THRILLVILLE as a kid, but kids are pretty easily entertained. I know I was an easily entertained kid. My concern is that I'm remembering this game wrong. My memories are convincing me something's different than it is. So the question I want to answer is THRILLVILLE Off the Rails shovelware garbage, or is it a great tycoon game? When it was released, we had plenty of tycoon games around, the most famously being known as Roller Coaster Tycoon, which was released 8 years earlier in 1999. This game was a massive success and very innovative for its time. It was simple yet complex and gave a big creative outlet for players. It was so successful that there are like 30 of these games. Each one is worse than the last. THRILLVILLE may have been piggybacking off that success as the first game in this 2-game series, released the same year as Roller Coaster Tycoon 3. And I should clarify that now, the game I'm talking about is Off the Rails, not the original one. I don't know anything about the original one, so if I say THRILLVILLE, I'm talking about the second. Off the Rails starts with the player's uncle talking about how successful the original park was, but that the park's rival, Globo-Joy and Vernon Garrison, want revenge and will do anything to get it. Over the course of the game, the player works to combat their revenge plots, which vary depending on the park you're in. In one park, they simply manipulate the critics, and in another, they straight up hypnotize them? Talk about supervillains! The game ends with the player discovering there is a spy, Vernon Garrison Jr., stealing THRILLVILLE's ideas. This long rivalry, littered with horrible scheming, manipulation, and violence, is decided with... I guess what matters is that we won. THRILLVILLE is saved and Junior over here is fired, although he swears revenge in a third game that would never exist. This isn't an innovative story and it's pretty simple, but it's got that childlike spirit that's kind of sweet, and honestly, for a game like this where story isn't really needed, it was nice they included one at all. It wasn't the same thing over and over again either due to the revenge plots I mentioned a second ago. Having different parks to work on keeps gameplay from getting boring too. There are 5 in total, each with a different theme. Gameplay-wise, the mechanics between each park is similar. There's a little bit of variety in what games you can play, but for the most part it's the same, just harder as you go on. There's also a multiplayer mode where you can play minigames with friends. This was my personal favorite as a kid. There are some frustrating moments with the controls just due to the age of the game, specifically in this janitor training minigame. I was watching other people play it, and maybe I'm the only one who struggles with this, but I can't get it right. Why do I never aim properly? Moving around the parks feels smooth, and building roller coasters isn't bad at all. It's actually really fun. I love when you get thrown off a half-built one and everyone on it gets parachuted off. It's such a silly touch. They could have cut to a black screen, but they chose to add this tiny little creative detail. I like when games choose to do this stuff. They aren't necessary, but they add a little bit of character. It's often overlooked, especially nowadays. I should really address the graphics though. If you've looked at your screen once during this video, you've likely noticed that this game isn't exactly cinema. There's not much shading, which gives everything a kind of cartoony look. The animated cutscenes look okay, definitely from 2007, but okay. Whenever I think of graphics, I think of the cheerleading minigame where it's the same 2 models doing simple poses. The facial expressions aren't awful, but they're not good. This game is wicked old, so there is that excuse. Some people might say, well, the PlayStation 2 had Resident Evil 4 and Grand Theft Auto on it. I'm hesitant to put THRILLVILLE in this position because those are high-budget games and this is not. What I can compare it to is something like Piglet's Big Game, that semi-horror game that blew up on Twitter last month. This game is 4 years older and looks better despite being shovelware. If your argument with this is that the developers had something to work with prior, then look at Haunting Ground, or Rule of Rose, or Silent Hill 2, or Psychonauts. The list goes on. THRILLVILLE was behind on graphics, but if graphics were the most important part of games, then they wouldn't be that good. Look at the new Call of Duty games if you want realistic graphics and bad gameplay. You're missing out if you prioritize that stuff. You might be thinking, didn't they just copy Roller Coaster Tycoon? Why should I play this game when it's a ripoff? Here's the cool thing about that. Frontier Developments also developed Roller Coaster Tycoon. And like every other roller coaster game, this is most of what they do. Planet Coaster was developed by them too. I didn't even know about this, and I've played all 3 games. They have a firm grip on the roller coaster genre, which is like really specific. Is it a ripoff if the game has the same developer? I don't think so. I also think even if they didn't have the same developer, that they're different enough to justify being 2 different games. THRILLVILLE has a story, minigames, and missions. You get to walk around your park and interact with guests. Roller Coaster Tycoon is more dedicated to actual park management. You build your own park from the ground up, unlike the base you get from the different parks in THRILLVILLE. It's 2 different experiences with similar concepts. After replaying THRILLVILLE and considering every aspect of it, I don't think it should be called shovelware. It's a charming game with a lot of personality. It's fun to run around and see your work come to fruit, and to play all the minigames, and to see simple little story progress. I loved reliving my childhood with this. It brought back memories I haven't thought about in years. So, as I like to say, you should really check it out. It's only $10, and it goes on sale all the time for like $2. Please? If you don't like tycoon games, yeah, you're gonna hate it, but if you do, go ahead and try it. I promise you're gonna get some enjoyment out of it. Thanks for watching.